On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Kansas loses their third Big 12 road game. They fall 79-75 at Iowa State. We break down the game as Iowa State just hit another three.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. We are breaking down, recapping the Kansas-Iowa State game, top 25 showdown. Kansas came in as about a 3 or 4 point underdog, depending when you got it. And they ended up falling by 4 points right along that line. So we're breaking down the game, what went wrong for KU, what went right for Iowa State, go to the game, good and bad, and what's next for KU men's basketball. First, this episode of the show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase with Gametime. Kansas falls 79-75. And they are now 16-4 in overall record, 4-3 in conference play. Meanwhile, Iowa State is sitting in a good position. They're 5-2 in conference play. They already have wins over Kansas and Houston, and they don't have to play a return trip to Lawrence this year. They also don't have a trip to Lubbock, and Texas Tech is one of the better teams in the league so far this year, and that's one of the tough places to play. I got Iowa State at 10-1 on FanDuel to win the Big 12 a few days ago, and I'm feeling a little bit better about that. But not feeling as good about where KU is at, that's for sure. Now, Iowa State shot KU out of the building in this game. They went 14 of 30 from three. And this was a Iowa State team that had not been a very good three-point shooting team on the year. They came in the bottom, basically 50 of the country in terms of the amount of shots they're getting per game from three. So very low volume. For them to take 30 is on its own very high, but obviously when they're going in, you keep shooting them. The 14 made threes were their most in like 2 or 3 years, and they came in Big 12 only games shooting 26.5% from three. They go 14 of 30. Trey King is the most of all here. He came into this game, Trey King, 7 of 31 across 42 games. So taking less than a three per game in his Iowa State career. He's been at Iowa State this is now a season and a half. He was with them last year and now this year. He hit 4 threes last year. He came in 3 made threes this year. He went 4 of 7 from three in this one game alone. And so we have to keep, bringing this keeps happening to Kansas. Now, this is not unusual. This has happened year over year where you have like one guy like a Trey King who is not a great three-point shooter, all of a sudden just go off against KU. That has been happening like season over season, it seems like, to KU. But this year, it seems like it is happening at an even more alarming rate, and it's not just one guy. It's happening with a whole team doing it against them. And so it has to bring up this conversation of the interesting discourse of three-point defense, right? Because, it's one of those things with three-point defense where there is a bit of luck involved. Like there's only so much you can do. When teams are taking shots at the rim, you can block them. It's very hard to block a three. You might have one block, 3 shot over the course of like 2 weeks of play. Like it doesn't happen that often blocking a 3-point shot. So once it's up in the air, there's only so much you can do, but hope and pray that it's no good. Now, over the course of time, the more 3-point shots, the more jump shots you contest versus uncontested ones. Obviously, over the course of time, contested ones are not going to go in as much. But in a one-game sample size, you can still contest threes, and it's just not your day, and it's the other team's day. And I think there's a bit of that in that game for Iowa State. Now, obviously, there's going to be breakdowns. There's going to be open threes that you give up. But that's every game. Both teams are going to have open threes throughout the game. Both teams are going to have a handful of open threes that they just get a breakdown on the defense. That is natural. And so you understand you're going to give up some. But it's the ones where they're shooting 25-footers that have a hand in their face. They have a good hand in their face or a good closeout, and they're still making the threes. Those are the backbreakers. And specifically, you can point to and be like, well, why is the three-point defense not better? Well, okay, first of all, I do think there are certain holes in KU's three-point defense. Like when you have more of a slow center like Hunter Dickinson, when you're basically playing, 2 bigs basically with KJ Adams and Hunter Dickinson, obviously you're going to be more prone to teams with speed, to teams dribble driving, to teams kicking for three, to teams having more guards out there and shooting threes. Okay, there is a little bit of that, sure. Based on how, KU defends under Bill Self, it is more drop coverage. It is, maybe you're more willing to give up a three than you are a shot at the rim. Okay, so there are a couple things there that lead you to believe, yeah, there's going to be some times where teams shoot well from threes. But again, there is some bad luck involved here too, because some of the threes, and you go back to the Iowa State game, they hit a lot of threes that were, tough shots. And part of scouting reports, if you see a player like Trey King, who in his 42 games at Iowa State is 7 of 31 from three, isn't that a smart decision to be like, hey, we're actually going to live with him shooting threes. We're going to live with him shooting threes because at most he's averaging less than one per game. He'll take 2 or 3. He'll hit 1 or 2 at most. You were never expecting this to happen. And so, you could easily say, right, like we could go another week and KU could be playing a team who has a player who's bad at three-point shooting, and KU could sag off him and basically add an extra defender on the interior and shut down the opponent. And everybody would be like, wow, great job by Bill Self. That was a smart ploy. He did this like strategically to help the interior defense, and you didn't have to worry about the guy from three. Well, you took that risk in this game and it didn't pay off. Every other team who does that against Trey King this year, it probably will pay off. So that is a bit of bad luck, right? And yes, there are certain things that you could get a little bit better at, like the big three that they hit at the end of the game when it was, 74-72, shot clock's going down, it's down to like 1. Like that's one where, yeah, Furphy does get kind of a hand in his face a little bit and he hits the three. But that's one where it's like, okay, there is a little bit of you should have done more there. There's one on the shot clock. Make him drive because he's not going to have time to get all the way to the rim. Get up all the way on him, and maybe that one doesn't go in. So I think it's a little bit of both when you're looking at the three-point defense or the lack thereof right now, is that there is a little bit of, yeah, KU probably could do a better job at defending it, but I do think there is a lot of it that's just crap luck going against KU, and some of it's even strategic crap luck kind of going against you that you're making calculated risks and they're just not paying off right now. Is this going to turn later in the year? Is it not? I guess that remains to be seen. But in the idea, just KU's defense as a whole, some of them are the West Virginia game and this game where it is that unconscious ability to shoot from three, but KU's defense has really been dropping over conference play. And of KU's 9 least efficient games on KenPom defensively, 6 of those 9 least efficient games are in conference play. So while the offense has been soaring up in conference play, the defense has been tanking pretty hard. We'll see if that can figure itself out as it goes on. But even like that, even just like the West Virginia game, even with them shooting that well from three, you did have some other chances that you could have kept up. I mean, there was a lot of times where this was a 4 or 6 point game, kind of surprisingly. The rebounding, you actually ended up doing a good job on the glass, but there were a couple key moments where you gave up some big offensive rebounds. They actually ended up with a 3-point edge in second chance points. Okay. In a 4-point game, 3 points can be a big enough difference there, right? Avoiding live ball turnovers. KU actually did a good job avoiding turnovers overall, but there was a big difference in which team had more live ball than the other. And Iowa State ended up winning 15-9 in points off of turnovers. 6-point advantage in a 4-point game for a team that, typically with Iowa State struggles in the half court. Obviously, that wasn't the case today because of the 3-point shooting. Iowa State also led 9-7 in fast break points. That was something coming in. We said that Kansas should have an advantage in, and they didn't. So those 3 things kind of add up. And then KU just not forcing turnovers. They only had 5 steals in this game, even though Iowa State has not been, one of the elite teams at holding on to the basketball. And even though Iowa State had 11 turnovers, you didn't get the live ball ones with only 5 steals like they did, where even though the turnover numbers were really close between the two teams, theirs more led to buckets than yours did because theirs were more of the steal variety. And then on top of that, like the play at the end of the first half changed everything. I thought Dajuan played a really good game, and we'll get to that in our goats of the game. But there was that one big, fumble, and this was a lot of different things that went into this. Dajuan Harris just kind of loses the ball. You're going for a 2-for-1. You're up 1 at the end toward the end of the first half. Dajuan loses the ball. It leads to a run out for Tameen Lipsey. He gets fouled by Parker Brown. It's a flagrant. Then that leads to Bill Self getting a technical. Then Marco Jackson messes up the switch, gives up a wide open 3 to a 40% 3-point shooter. And boom, just like that, that's a 5-point swing in a game you lost by 4. None of that happens if Dajuan doesn't turn the ball over there. And instead, Kansas gets a 2-for-1, and they get 2 shots at the end of the first half in addition to that. And it's those plays that drive you crazy because, again, I thought Dajuan played a really good game, but you're looking for more consistency there, and that could have been the backbreaker in the game. The sad part to all this is that KU actually wound up having a good offensive game considering what they were going up against. Iowa State is one of the best defenses in the country. This wasn't the most efficient game in the world for KU, but when you take that into account, shooting 45% from the floor, 35% from three, you got to the line, you were aggressive getting downhill. 12 turnovers isn't a terrible number against the number one turnover defense in the country. You won 36 to 24 points in the paint. You had what ended up being KU's fifth best offensive rebounding rate of the season in a game. And you did all this despite your two All-American candidates collectively missing 22 shots. So, like, there are some positive takeaways from the offense. And honestly, had KU not lost to, one of West Virginia or UCF, I think this loss would be a lot easier to stomach. It would be like, okay, that sucked, but Iowa State, you just tip your cap. They're a good team. You played them on the road, tough place to play, and they got extremely hot from three. But because you lost to West Virginia and UCF, you no longer have the room for error to avoid it. It's like in Family Guy in the early going, there's the Spider-Man, like everybody gets one, Peter. Everybody gets one, but the problem is when you have lost some of these games you're not supposed to, it loses your margin for error in the games where normally it's okay to lose, but now you have to make those games up, and you weren't able to today. So the result of this is Kansas is now 1-3 on the road in Big 12 play. And that's in their easier half of the schedule. One that I said before the Big 12 started, I thought they'd need 7-1 or 8-0 to win the league. I kind of said, okay, maybe you could get it done though with 6-2, but they're now 4-3, which means at best, if you beat Oklahoma State on Tuesday, you're going to be 5-3 in Big 12 play, well below that mark. And if 13 wins, if you think 13 wins the Big 12, I don't know. Honestly, 14 could do it. I think Houston is that good. They continue to blow teams out, but they also have 2 losses. So maybe 13 does get it done. Maybe 12 does get it done. But let's say 13 gets it done, which I think is kind of a safe in the middle estimation there. If you think 13-5 wins the Big 12, that means Kansas would have to finish 9-2 the rest of the way. Go look at the rest of the schedule. Tell me how likely that is, especially based on how they're playing right now. And for what it's worth, Ken Palm's projecting Kansas at 10-8. In conference play, meaning a 6-5 finish. And given that back 11 games of the schedule, 6-5 wouldn't even be the worst record you could go in the world, considering you're playing Houston twice and you're playing Baylor twice and you're playing BYU and Texas and Kansas State twice. Like at Texas Tech, a tough place to play. So good luck the rest of the way. It is very much uphill for Kansas to win the Big 12 from here, even though I guess technically they're only like one back in the standings of where Houston is at. All right, we're going to continue on with our goats of the game. Then what's next for KU men's basketball on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater near you with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed. You can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to be having. Maybe going to a comedy or theater event would be a nice, wash after this game, and you don't know what's in town. Well, check it out with Gametime. You can see flash deals and last-minute tickets, images of the seat views. You can even see the different section views. If you go to the stadium view, they have exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, and theater. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. You can get cheap tickets to the KU Oklahoma State game Tuesday. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Onto our goats of the game. We'll start with our good goats. I did think Dajuan Harris had a really good game. 9 points. He was 4 of 6 from the floor. Made his layups. That was a big thing. 7 assists to 2 turnovers. You take that assist to turnover rate every time against the number 1 turnover rate defense in the country. 2 rebounds, 2 steals, 1 block. He was active on the defensive end. He had to deal with Tameen Lipsey on both ends, which, Lipsey is certainly pacing to be an all Big 12, possibly first-team performer overall, but also all Big 12 defensive performer, and it was tough for Dajuan, but he kept KU in that game in a lot of ways. Obviously, that big blunder at the end of the first half, it wasn't all him, but it was started with him, and you like to have that one back. But I think overall, Dajuan did play a really good game for KU. Johnny Furphy gets a good goat here. Again, kind of same thing here. There are a couple setbacks. There were a few times where Furphy maybe gave up a lane to the rim or didn't switch onto his guy and gave up maybe a couple threes as part of the game. And he gave up the 1-3 kind of at the end, even though it was contested. It could have been more contested given the shot clock situation. So still some things you try to iron out as a freshman. But overall, 15 points on 5 of 8, 3 of 5 from 3 against a top 5 defense in the country, 6 rebounds, 1 steal. KU was going to get 3-point opportunities. Iowa State gives up a ton of threes on the season because they pack the paint and they limit you from shots inside. KU needed to take advantage of the outside, and Furphy did just that, going 3 of 5. He continues to impress. And while I feel like KU's chances at winning the Big 12 have severely dropped given the start in conference play, I do feel better about the long term since Furphy has entered into the lineup because he certainly has given them a nice element and another offensive score. KJ Adams in the second half gets a good go. First half could probably go the other way. 0 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 2 turnover, only 7 minutes of play. He had the 2 fouls, had the foul trouble. But second half, he was excellent. And a lot of time when KU was down 10, 11, 12 points, he kept trying to will them back into it and driving and attacking to the rim. He finished with 13 points. He was 3 of 6 from the floor, also 7 of 10 at the foul line. Ended up with 4 rebounds in the second half, 2 assists, played all 20 minutes in the second half. So excellent second half for KJ Adams that nearly had you almost coming back at the very end there. Same thing for Hunter Dickinson. Hunter Dickinson in the second half. First half was not great. He only had 4 points on 2 of 7 with a turnover in the first half. But here's his second half line. 16 points on 7 of 11, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, also played 20 minutes of play. And overall, he finished with 20 points on 9 of 18, finished with 15 rebounds, 4 assists, and he really only struggled from 3. He was just 1 of 5 from 3. You know, if he makes one more of those, all of a sudden it's 40% from 3, and maybe things are changed a little bit there. But he was excellent in the second half when you really needed it. And one thing I do think is interesting there, though, KJ plays 20 minutes in the second half. Hunter plays 20 minutes in the second half. And you see some of KU's recent defensive struggles, or maybe losing some hustle balls every so often, or not being able to close out to a shooter as quick. You do wonder if the lack of depth over a regular season comes back to haunt KU, and that players are playing a little tired out there because KU can't really go to their bench that much. That brings us to our bad goats. I hate to put him on there because he's been excellent this season, but Kevin McCullough had a real tough one. He did have 16 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists. So that in itself is like, okay, those are, solid numbers. But he shot just 5 of 18 from the floor, 2 of 8 from 3. He hit those last 2 threes. One of them that felt like, okay, now you have a chance. But the other one was kind of the garbage time 3 at the end there that I guess did get Kansas to cover if you got him at plus 4.5. But tough shooting game from Kevin. And part of the thing was, as I mentioned with Furphy, you knew Iowa State gives up a lot of threes this season. So you knew he was going to have opportunities. You see the 2 of 8 from 3, and sometimes you can just have down shooting games. But what's tough about this one is how many of those misses were like open shots or wide open shots for Kevin, and they just weren't falling for him, just a little bit off. So you expect him to bounce back because that's what All-American candidates do, and that's what he is. But that was tough. And beyond that, he had 5 turnovers. Feels like in some key games this year, like the Marquette game comes to mind, Kevin has seen the turnover numbers jump a little bit too high. But overall, like I said, I think you expect him to bounce back. And then the bench gets another bad goat here. I feel like this is kind of becoming game in, game out at this point. Elmarco Jackson played 8 minutes. He had 1 rebound, 1 assist, and 3 fouls. Jamari McDowell, 4 minutes, 0 stats. Parker Brown had 5 minutes played, 2 points, 1 rebound, 1 foul. He had a game worst minus 13 on plus minus. Nick Timberlake played 8 minutes. He was 0 for 3 with a rebound, including missing that wide open mid-range jump shot. Total it up from the bench, the 4 players for KU. 25 minutes played, 2 points on 1 of 4, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, and 4 fouls. If you said a starter played 25 minutes, had 2 points on 1 of 4, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 4 fouls, you'd be like, what is going on, man? But again, that keeps kind of happening game in and game out. The last one here, I guess, do you chalk it up to defense? Do you chalk it up to luck? Combination of both? Whatever it is on that end of the floor, things are not clicking right now and certainly did not in this game. All right, let's get to what's next for KU men's basketball on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. First, we are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays, find bets in the new Explore tab, make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup. You can get it on the Chiefs action. I guess you can fade KU with where that's going. I think they're like officially 8-12 against the spread this year with that last minute 3 for Kevin kind of boosting that up. So FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. What's next for KU men's basketball? And we'll have an Oklahoma State preview for that next game coming out on Tuesday. That'll be an 8 o'clock game for KU back in Allen Fieldhouse. Good chance to get back on the winning ways against bottom team in the Big 12 playing at home. But the schedule does not get kind after that, right? Because you're playing against Houston this next Saturday. Houston just buried Kansas State. I think Jerome Tang after the game said that is the best defensive team I have ever played. And honestly, you look at some of the KenPom numbers, it's not like that outlandish to say because Houston right now is number one on defense. Usually, like, for instance, Iowa State is a top 5 defense in the country right now. Even after that game against Kansas, they're 4th. But they mainly do it by being like elite at forcing turnovers, and then they're like, solid to good at basically a lot of other things. Houston is just elite at everything. Number 1 effective field goal percentage defense, number 3 turnover defense, number 10 3-point defense, number 1 2-point defense, number 2 free throw defense, number 1 block defense, number 1 steal defense in the country. They're just elite at everything. So that'll be a good, litmus test for KU. But if you do win out this next week, then I guess maybe you feel like you're kind of back, so to speak, even though both of them would be at home, and that wouldn't fix any of your questions about can they win on the road, especially in a big game right now. But that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back later this week for that Oklahoma State preview. We'll talk about that Houston game as well and plenty more to come. Make sure you're subscribed anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the action. See you next time.